So here we are at the Bonanza mine. This is located between Greenhorn and Sumter, pretty close to Greenhorn. And this mine was found in 1877 by a fellow named Jack Haggard. He operated the mine kind of for 2 years. The early production was around 10 ounces each year, those first couple years. And then in 1879, a company was formed, Bonanza Mines Incorporated, and at that point, Jack Haggard sold it to this company for $350. Over the lifespan of this mine, which ended in 1904, it produced just shy of 100,000 ounces of gold out of this mine. Pretty rich mine. Most of the reports say it was at least 0.6 ounces per ton through most of it. The early workings were closer to 2 ounces per ton, but that was probably pretty high graded ore there. So early on, it was probably very selective which ore they processed. So a lot of times when that happens, the mill returns look pretty high, 2 to 3 ounces per ton, but it's pretty select ore that they're running to get that. The regular, what most mines would run, it averaged about 0.6 ounces per ton, which is actually pretty good. Now, this mine is actually owned by Marathon Gold. It's a Canadian company. I think it's actually Marathon Gold International. They bought the property in 2012. I've looked through their report that they have on their website. They were hoping to go back in 2013 and do some drilling, some diamond drilling, some exploratory work. I don't think any of that's ever been done yet. It sounded like they had another project pop up at the same time, so they concentrated their efforts on that project, which is, I think, somewhere in Canada. And this project's been kind of on hold, it looks like. I've tried contacting the company a couple times with no response, so don't know what the future holds for it, but we're kind of hoping it's still maybe going to be an active mine in somewhat of the near future. And the other thing, they may be holding off to see how this grassy knoll or grassy hill project over in Malheur County turns out. It's a rather large, or fairly large operation that a company is planning on, I think it's Paramount Gold, is planning on operating there in Malheur County. They're going through the permitting process here in Oregon, which is rather difficult from what I understand for a larger mine. So I kind of wonder if they're kind of holding off to see how that pans out. You know, let somebody else take all the hits on how to get through that process, because that one is the first one in Oregon since they put those new mining rules in effect. I believe it was in the early 90s. They put a new set of rules out there and made it really difficult to have a large mining operation in Oregon. So let's look at Google Earth and kind of get a layout of this mine and look at a couple mining maps. This mine, I don't know a whole lot about it before I went up there. We just happened to go on a UTV ride, and I thought, hey, the Bonanza mine's pretty close. Let's get some footage of it. And this was a couple months ago. I just got around to editing it and looking at the footage, which there's one surprise in here. You really got to stay tuned and help me figure out what this is. And by the way, this level we're looking at, I believe, is the 500 level, and it's collapsed, you know, 30, 40 feet back in there. And when I drove up, I was pretty sure it was collapsed. Up above, you can see the hillsides all slumped in, but I was surprised at the amount of water coming out of that level. And it sounds like this was the main haulage level once the mine was operated with a new shaft. By the way, this mine had the deepest shaft in Oregon. I don't know if it's still true. I haven't really looked into it real close to see if there's another mine that surpassed it, but this shaft they sunk on this mine was 1,250 feet deep. And a company took this over in 1898, I believe it was, and sunk 3 shafts on this property and went into high production and operated till 1904, till their superintendent was killed. And then they just ceased operation. They put it in a mothball. But it was kind of interesting. The watchman actually operated a 5-stamp mill, apparently right at this portal I'm standing at. So kind of interesting. I didn't know all that until I got back and read some of the history about this mine. And the production from that little 5-stamp mill was not recorded, so nobody has any clue what that watchman really produced during those years. And he operated it, I believe, from 1904 to 1925. So kind of interesting. And a lot of work has went into this mine in some exploratory work in the 40s, and then in the 50s, and then in the 70s they actually did some drilling. But the company that did the drilling, looks like they kind of salted the samples, because they were showing up 2 or 3 ounces plus per ton. I think even one of them showed 6 ounces per ton. This was found out and the company went bankrupt. So anyway, let's look at those maps and get a lay of the land here, and then we'll dive into the footage. Okay, so currently right here is where we're at, this 500 level. And this was supposedly the production level from all the records I can find of the mine. Most of the ore, once the mine was developed, was hauled out of this tunnel. And it kind of threw me because there's not a huge waste rock pile here. There is a waste rock pile. It just wouldn't be what you'd expect out of the production level. And the other thing that's kind of odd is the mill was actually over here. And evidently at some point the watchman put a 5-stamp mill right here. But the big mill was right over here. Now here's a picture of that original mill. And as you can see, there was wood just stacked up like crazy around this. So there was no electricity at this mine. This was all steam powered and used boilers and all that kind of setup. Even the huge hoist was evidently operated with only steam power. As you can see back here in the background, there is another, what looks like a mill set up there and a tailing pile. And I did not get up there to see this when I was there. I actually missed the foundation for this mill. I'm sure it's still there. I don't know how I walked by it, but evidently I did. And we didn't spend a lot of time at this mine that day. So this is going to require another visit to explore some of this, what this was. At first I thought maybe this was the 500 level. That would kind of make sense if you look at Google Earth, that they would just haul the ore down right directly to this. But all the other maps show the 500 was where we were just standing. So that mill and adit we were just looking at up behind the mill, I believe is right here. There's a tailing pile right there. I don't think it's open, and the road comes in right above it and just stops there. So I'm going to have to go back up there and explore this a little more to figure out what that was. I'm sure it was part of this mine. It's just really not shown very well on any of the maps. And that's one of the things in the documents from Marathon Gold, is that pretty clear that a lot of the old maps have disappeared, gone. They don't know really what's below the 600 level that much. They've got a rough idea, but really no detailed maps of what's down there. Since the superintendent was killed, it looks like a lot of that information was just lost. So here's the 500 level, and that's about the water level in the mine. Everything below this level is flooded. And up here is the 200 level, which you'll see in just a moment. We'll go up to this, and this adit is open, and it's got a fairly large, let's zoom in here a little bit. This is a fairly large waste rock pile from this level. And I think earlier on in the mine, before they sank these shafts, this is where most of the production happened, is off of this level. What is strange about it, and you'll see this in a minute, this is not a very tall adit. And a lot of the old records say that this was their dewatering tunnel. So I'm not really sure what to make of this. Whether they did have a couple older shafts that are located up here, and there's another one here that really don't have a lot of records attached to them. And so I kind of think early on that this was, these were sank, and they dug this 200 level in just to dewater the mine. And then later, in the late 1800s, when they sank this main shaft, this was more or less, this 200 level was mostly abandoned. And let's look at one of those maps real quick. So I'm not really sure what year this map was drawn. It looks kind of like 1941, but I'm not real sure. And you can see the shaft house, and this was the deep shaft. This is rather confusing, the way this is drawn. And so this is, I believe this is the actual 200 level. This shows the old 200 level. This is the 300 level, and here's the 500 level. And this map does not show the tunnel coming in, which is down lower, the one we were just standing at. This map doesn't show it. One of the maps from Marathon Gold actually shows this being there. But this is the level we're going to be going to here shortly. And this would have been what they call the dewatering level. Now, the other interesting thing about this is this map shows that this was connected at all these different levels. But the other documentation from Marathon and a couple other sources I read, this main shaft was actually not connected to any of these levels directly until you reach the 600 level. That's the first stopping point of that shaft where you could get out of the shaft car and get onto a level, was here at the 600, then down to the 800, the 1000, and I think they had one about the 1150 or so. So those were the only levels that you could stop at. Even though that this map shows these are connected, they evidently are not. They're sort of connected by cross cuts, and then this number one shaft went up and connected the rest of them. And evidently this number one shaft did not daylight anywhere. This just came up to a spot at this level and was sank down. So this map is courtesy of Marathon Gold. It's on their website, not super secret information, but they've got a full report there on their website. It's actually very interesting to read. If you're into geology stuff, it's pretty interesting to read anyway. And this is a little more detailed map. You can see here's the main shaft, and right here's the first level. It really connects, and then the only way to get to the other workings would have been through here, evidently. So there was 3 working shafts in this mine at different points. The shaft 2 here that connected down to the 300 level. The shaft 1, which went down to the 600 level, and then this main shaft that they sank. And this was a large diameter shaft. I believe it was either a 3 or 4 compartment shaft, and it went clear down to the 1250 foot level. And you can see Marathon's map, and I think some of this is just rough estimates because all the old maps were lost, but it shows a level here at the 1200, the 1100, the 1000, 800, and 600. And a lot of this area down in here was really not explored that much, it doesn't sound like. And past 1904, nobody's been down past this 500 level. And here this also shows the portal, and I think this was 1900 feet. It's not the 1900 foot level, it's the 1900 feet out to the portal. And this is the 500 level, and that's the water level in the mine. So everything below that is flooded, and nobody's been in there since 1904. And so that's what Marathon is hoping to do, is go in there and drill this and figure out what they've got down here. It sounds like they think there's a pretty good reserve of gold down in there. And the old timers, they tried to steer away from this right here, this sulfided ore. It was hard to process. They didn't really have the technology back then to do a good job at it. And so we have the technology now to do it and do it efficiently. So a company like Marathon can go in and actually make some money at this. And there's also a lot of ground in here that it apparently was not stoped out. May have some valuable minerals left in there. So let's go on up, and we'll go up to this 200 level and show you what that looks like. And you can see these are pretty good sized waste rock piles. And guess what? Like many of the mines in the area, they're mainly made up of argillite or slate, whatever you want to call it. And here we're walking up to that 200 level, and there's a fair amount of water coming out of this. You got to keep in mind this was very late summer, and we hadn't had rain in months, so there's a fair amount of water in this mine, and especially down at that 500 level, there was a lot of water coming out. I'm not sure if this is the original height of this tunnel going in or not, but as you'll see here in a second, this is pretty short going through there. Obviously it's got quite a bit of water in it, but if you look through that water, This is probably only maybe 4 feet tall, and I don't know if this is stuff is slumped in from the ceiling or it's been backfilled some, but I don't really think it was slumped in from the ceiling because that tunnel stays that same height all the way back. Usually if it's slumped in, it's just in spots. Now this goes back and obviously connects to a lot more workings, but it's full of water. Without a lot of work, you could probably dig that out. What was that? Let's play it again. I've looked through this footage like 20 times trying to figure out what that was. I've tried to recreate the sound with the mic. I can't do it, rubbing it up against things. Because at that point I was in the process of pushing myself up. My head was up away from the that entrance, and just the camera was sitting down there. And I don't know what it picked up, because the mic on the camera is a directional mic, so it only pretty much picks up things out in front of me. I don't know what this is. You guys have any idea? I know what it sounds like. It sounds like a cougar, but I don't know where it was, if there was one there. Like I said, I've been through this footage, I don't know, 30 times trying to spot something when I was walking up to the tunnel entrance to see if there was something there that I didn't see. I can't explain that sound. It sure sounds like a cougar. I've heard cougars before, and that sounds like a cougar. I don't know. It's a mystery. I didn't even know it was there till I was editing the footage. I'm like, what in the world was that? And like I said, I've rubbed things up against the mic trying to recreate the sound. I thought maybe I rubbed it against something. The sound I can't recreate. So I don't know. What do you guys think that is? It's probably why you shouldn't mess around old mines. So no, we did not go into this adit, which it's really not an adit, it's a tunnel. And the difference between an adit and a tunnel is an adit's usually just a dead end. It doesn't connect to anything. It just goes back in a hillside and stops. A tunnel usually indicates there's a place you can get out of that mine a different way. It's just one entrance to the mine. That's usually the difference between an adit and a tunnel. A portal is just the opening that goes into either one of those. Now, with that being said, many of the old mine maps showed it both ways. I've seen them listed adits, and it goes in and connects to a lot of workings and daylight somewhere else. And I've also seen them listed as tunnels, and it just goes back in the hillside and dead ends. So on the old maps, it can be shown either way. Depends on who drew them, but I think the right terminology for everybody to use is an adit goes back, dead ends. A tunnel connects to daylight somewhere else. Now here we're pulling up to the main shaft level, and this would have been the hoist house right here. And this would have been built in the late 1800s when they sank this shaft. There's quite a few old bricks and concrete pads left up there. A little bit of cabling and miscellaneous metal laying around, but no big, artifacts right around this hoist house. There's something coming up here that I have no idea what they are. These two big, huge sunk-in pipes, and they're curved on top like a boiler or something sat right on top of them. I have no idea what those were for. You can see this was a well-built foundation for this hoist. And then there's some notches on the side that I'm hoping somebody has an idea what they're for. There's one on each side, and I'm assuming it has something to do with the steam pistons that were in place here. But they're fairly large, and they're notched out perfectly on both sides, and they're round on the bottom. Again, kind of a mystery what these exactly are. Let's look back at what this used to look like on the inside. This is a really good picture of the hoist house from the inside. And one thing I want you to notice, in the upper left, there's that pipe, that curved piece of pipe. And look at this shot real quick. I'm pretty sure that piece of pipe right there is the same piece of pipe you see in the picture, or at least part of it. I just thought that was pretty interesting to see that same piece of pipe. I just happened to notice it when I was looking at this picture. And something else I caught on this picture, it's pretty obvious the man standing on the left. But behind that hoist on the right, that appears to be a female standing there. It kind of threw me at first. I didn't notice it, and then when I was looking at this a little closer, I just happened to spot the head sticking up there. So I'm pretty sure that's a female standing right there. And the two hoists you see up front there, those are smaller hoists. If you look behind the man standing there, that's the main hoist back there. That's a very big drum full of cable. And where the ore went from this location, I'm not sure. Some of the old maps show an actual tram going down the hill to the mill site. And I'm not sure if they operated that way the whole time, or I kind of think the tram was done away with earlier on and it was all hauled out at the 500 level. But I'm really not sure. The documentation isn't real clear about what actually happened there. But obviously, this one picture of the hoist house shows a trestle going away from it for ore cars. Where it went from there, I'm really not sure. There's no evidence that there was ever a mill up here on the top. At first, this would appear to be a mill up here, but usually mills are built on a hillside, so the gravity fed through them. This was simply the hoist house for that deep shaft. And here we're walking up to where the actual shaft would have been. And this hole is quite a distance across it. It's got to be at least 50 feet across from one side to the other, and it's probably a good 50 or 40 feet deep here. Really doesn't show up on camera, but it's a pretty deep hole. If you got down in it, you could get out, but I don't think I'd want to go playing around down in there knowing that there's at least 1,200 feet below you that's open somewhere, at least down to the 500 level until you hit the water. So not something I'd go playing around down in there. And here we're just looking at some of the ore that's sitting up here around the top. Again, this was brecciated argillite is what they were after. If you look closely, you can see little veinlets over on the other side in the argillite. And this did have a fence around it at one time, but it's been destroyed, and it's just like one strand left here and there. Again, this was a 3 or 4 compartment shaft. I've seen records indicating it was 3. Another one say it was 4. I definitely see 3 different hoists in the hoisting house, so there was at least 3 compartments in it. And those timbers over on the other side are huge. Most of them are, probably 20 inches thick in spots. A lot of them are a good 16 inches. And here's some of that argillite. And here we're looking off the waste rock pile, kind of over towards John Day. It's quite a extensive waste rock pile up here at the main shaft, so obviously they took a lot of material out of this, especially if they dug a 3 or 4 compartment shaft down to 1,250 feet. That would have required a lot of material to be removed. And here's a look at some of those timbers that were on the opposite side of the shaft opening. Like I said, these are very large timbers, and most of it's pretty clear lumber. Very few knots in it. Pretty impressive. And here we're going to be looking down at the 200 level, which is right down below us, where we were just a few moments ago. You can see that waste rock pile. And further, over the edge of that ridge is where the 500 level is. You can't quite see it from here. Let's dive in and look at some of the pictures of this old mine. Well, I hope you enjoyed the video today about the Bonanza mine. I will be going back to this mine at some point, probably next year, since there's already some snow up there, because there's a lot of information I dug up about this mine after I got back, so I'd like to go investigate some more around this mine. So thanks for watching, subscribing, giving us a thumbs up once in a while, and we always love comments, so leave us a comment, and we'll see you guys on the next video. So right there, the kids have their little video camera out. They both decided that they're going to make videos, so here's their premiere YouTube video.
All the way here, then we go to right in the UTB. So, and now we're watching for a few hours, and then Daddy, I done now. Take talk. Hello, the in the mountain, and it's a pretty field, with Bonehead, and Daddy, and Mama, and Geology, and Rose. And what time? What? It was a rough time. And for a rough time, what else?
You guys making a video?
And now we're taking off on the Hornet.